Welcome back, everybody, to ND and Free, the podcast brought to you by the Awareness Space Network, a podcast and social media platform that explores how NDers can live their truth and feel free in their lives. We hear from inspiring coaches, therapists, experts, and fellow NDers from all over the world who sit down with me, Owen Morgan, to share their wisdom with us. I'm a wellbeing coach and ADHD coach in training. This July, I will be loud to the world. I received my ADHD diagnosis at 41. That day, the truth transformed my life. I was finally free of the burden of not knowing why I struggled to fit in. My mission is to explore how the human spirit and understanding our whole self can bring us a life full of possibilities. Okay, everyone, we are back for another edition of the Neurodivergent Thrive Guide show. We have a very special guest with us today. I'm getting guests from guests who know other people that can be guests. It's very special. We have nutritionist and food relationship coach Sophia Harris. Sophia supports amazing humans like you struggling with impulsive eating, food noise and over-restriction, and binge eating. She runs her business Apollo Nutrition and is the host of the Apollo Nutrition podcast, which is an epic podcast, guys. Go and check it out. Welcome, Sophia, to the show. How are you? And how does it feel to not be the host and to be the one in the hot seat?
Oh, what a lovely introduction as well. Very kind of you. Yeah, do you know what? It feels nice to be a guest and not have to plan the podcast myself for once, which it takes a lot of work to organize all of this, doesn't it? And you spend a lot of time and attention on your podcast, so you should be proud of yourself for that.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, and it does. People don't realize pre and post production. There's a lot goes into it. People don't realize how much. So, luckily, I love both. Well, all three stages of it, actually. It's fantastic. But yeah, I encourage people to go and check out your show. The links are in the description, guys, so you can go and check that out. So yeah, I'm really excited today, Sophia, to talk with you because we're going to be touching a lot on the nutrition elements of this generally and how it relates to neurodivergence. So I'm really excited, because I'm newly diagnosed. I have a very interesting relationship with food, so I'm hoping I'm going to walk away from this learning quite a lot. But give us some context, please. We've had your intro, but you tell us, what does life look like right now? What are you up to? How are you helping the community? What's Sophia up to right now?
Oh gosh. So we'll leave the coaching stuff because that is the majority of what my business is based on. And when I say we'll leave that, you've asked me, I guess, what I do in the community, like the ways that I support people. And obviously one-to-one coaching is the biggest part of that with my business, but there's lots of other super exciting things that we do as well. And we do quite a lot of work within the community. So there's a local charity that I volunteer for that we've got an event, a big event that we're running for in October. We do quite a lot of speaking in schools and at children's sports clubs because when we talk about food and nutrition, I'm really passionate about preventing issues with food, developing into disordered eating and worse eating disorders. So we do a lot of work on prevention, a lot of raising awareness of the issues that so many people face with food. We've got a free community group that we run as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into that with 3 videos that we put in a week and lots of podcasts and helpful resources that we put into there. From the business perspective, there's loads of different things. I've actually been asked to contribute to a app that a Send provider. So they've got 2 provisions that they have where they support lots of neurodivergent families. So I'm putting the content together for their app around nutrition and a lot of the things that me and you will be talking about today as well. So that's very exciting. I get to travel a lot for work and do lots of public speaking, quite a few face-to-face podcasts. And a lot of what I do talk about is neurodiversity and food. If I'm not talking about neurodiversity, it is all about food relationship and making nutrition accessible and practical. And the way I talk about everything is in a neurodivergent way, because that is how I speak. That is the way my brain works. A lot of our clients and a lot of the people we support are neurodivergent. Not all of them, but the majority of them are. And I've also recently launched a course for coaches to learn how to support their clients who've got ADHD with food. So it's actually a nutrition certification for coaches to expand their knowledge in that area because I believe it is very important So hopefully that wasn't too rambly, and it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of there's a lot of stuff we've got going on that we don't ever get a chance to talk about on social media because we're just here, there, and everywhere doing it all, which is a massive privilege, to be honest.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you. And it feels like that's, when you're in the coaching sphere and you're very passionate about that, it does lead to all of these other things that you're going to be doing, whether it's speaking opportunities, working on organizations. I think that's how coaches can really thrive. If we're talking, away from all of this and how coaches can thrive in business, so much of it is about that, isn't it? It's that having a foot in everywhere and helping as many people as you can. Surely that's the mission, which is
Yeah.
amazing. And yeah, there's so much going on. Like you said, your Instagram's brilliant and how it's all laid out, but I guess there's only so much you can say. I've learned that doing this as well. But give us, obviously, we know we're going to touch a little bit on your story, just a little bit. But the first question is, why do you care about the neurodivergent community and why do you want to help them? I think that's pretty obvious. If you want to combine that with your own journey as well, that would be awesome. Give us some context to why, well, your journey of neurodivergence and things like that as well.
Yeah. So the reason I think it's so important to help neurodivergent people is based on my own story. And also because I know that I am very privileged in many ways compared to a lot of neurodivergent people that aren't as privileged as me. So I feel that making this information accessible for neurodivergent people who don't have access to resources, therapy, medication, or who have more additional needs than I do, I think that is very, very important as well. So my own sort of journey with realizing I was neurodivergent, I've always known I was different. I've never felt like I fitted in. And as I grew up and was older, I found that I would have very strong connections with certain people that I now know are other neurodivergent people. So when I felt safe and understood, I could have really deep, meaningful conversations with some people, but then with others, there was just nothing there, like no common ground. I struggled with eating disorders from, well, my whole life, really. But I was diagnosed with anorexia when I was 14. That developed into bulimia, binge eating, exercise addiction, various different mental health issues. I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety and medicated for both of those things in my teenage years as well. And it got to a point in my life where I realized I was trying to fix myself and my issues with food with other shit coping strategies. So I developed binge drinking tendencies, and every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I would just get blackout drunk to try and, I guess, suppress the way that I was feeling, to try and have a break from the constant running narrative in my head. And if I was shit-faced, my brain wasn't running at 100 miles an hour, or if it was, I wasn't conscious of it. I then started associating with awful people, awful men. I do love men. Not all men are awful. There's many amazing ones out there, but I just refer to the, can I swear on this podcast or not?
Yeah, go on then.
I refer to them as fuck boys, just men you meet on nights out. So men that probably aren't very good for us. And I spent many years like sort of in that party sort of scene, I guess, with a huge lack of respect for my health, my body. Still very much struggling with food at that point, but I'd, recovered from the worst of eating disorders by then. And it was when I moved in with my friends, because I had a very turbulent upbringing. My dad is severely autistic, not diagnosed. My mum is severely ADHD, not diagnosed. So my childhood was interesting, to say the least. But it was when I moved in with my three best friends that I have been best friends with since school. And we started eating meals together and we built like a routine and a home. And I was like, oh my God, this is what calm feels like. This is what love feels like. This is connection. And they're still my three best friends now. They were my bridesmaids and I was with one of them yesterday, actually. So yeah, it was when I experienced real, true regulation and structure, support,
Mm.
which I'd never had in my life, that I was actually able to start working out where I wanted to be, who I was, and what I needed to do to support myself. I was diagnosed with ADHD, it's 2.5, coming up to 3 years ago now. And I was diagnosed with gosh, I can't get my words out, autism earlier this year. I don't know if you do this, put words together.
Yeah, it's because my brain is ahead. I'm doing the
Yeah,
next word as I'm saying yeah, they blend.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So yeah, diagnosed with autism earlier this year. That is a diagnosis I'm still coming to terms with myself, if I'm honest. Because for me, now ADHD is under control and I'm not impulsive in self-destructive ways. ADHD is quirky, it's fun. Um, and I know that isn't the case for everybody. So yeah, that's my experience. But it's autism that makes life very difficult and challenging at times. Um, so yeah, hopefully that has explained my own story. And I guess a lot of people have a big lack of understanding of how life can be very different for neurodivergent people, how food and fitness and nutrition can be very, very different and very difficult as well. So I'm very keen to raise awareness of that and allow people to realize that despite having a neurodivergent brain, if you struggle with food, you are not stuck. There's always little things that we can do. And yes, that probably needs to be dealt with differently than it does for neurotypical people. But that's why the more understanding we have, the more people are going to be able to get the support that they need.
Yeah, so true. And thank you so much for sharing that. I could literally do a whole episode on your story, I think, because it would help so many people to know the steps of that journey. But if I may ask you one big question around that, if that's okay. So, when you were a teenager, you were not only, I'm presuming you were going to be trying to understand your own brain and your own body and your own impulses and your own coping with the world or not coping with the world. So you've got that happening. And then you're in a household with NDers who may not even know, not aware, and are behaving in a certain way that you're trying to figure out. And there's a big talk about here about our childhood experience and ND. When those two things are put together, the utter chaos of that and the pain of all of that. And I'm sure, some good times as well, some wild, fun times, no doubt. But how when you came into, say, in your 20s, what do you think had the biggest impact, your own neurodivergent journey or being in that environment? Do you think it's 50-50? I'm just very interested in what people feel personally about that.
Do you mean the environment with my friends?
Your environment with your parents being in that household, them being ND and you being ND, they're two
Yeah.
correlating journeys, aren't they? And I wonder what impact you think that parenting had on you as you became an adult and how much of it is your own ND, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that does make sense. So, and I'm happy to talk about this. I've spoke about it on many podcasts before, actually. My relationship with my parents is something I've had to work on in therapy with setting boundaries and knowing how and when I can see them and the capacity I have. Um, because I grew up, both of my parents were diagnosed with depression. My mum struggled with manic depression and had various mental breakdowns that I now think, yes, there was depression there and they probably were mental breakdowns, but ADHD burnout as well. Um, and I left home when I was 16 because I couldn't live in that environment anymore.
Mhm.
It was very, very toxic, I guess is the best way to describe it. Me and my brother were very much left to our own devices a lot of the time. And that is how, not that I'm blaming my parents for eating disorders, because they're always, there's many reasons people develop eating disorders, but we were left to our own devices with food, a lot of the time. So leaving that, because I grew up thinking living in chaos, screaming, shouting, not knowing what mood was walking through the door with your parents, no emotional support, no love, like no love, zero, not even a little bit. Everything was conditional. And we grew up being told that we should feel grateful that our parents gave birth to us And that was almost used as a bargaining tool to not provide us with anything else. So leaving that, because I thought that was normal as a very young child, and seeing how other families functioned, that came with a great deal of sadness, which now I just feel lucky that I've got such incredible friends whose families that I've, taken so much from over the years, and then learned what love is and what family is and what that means, and been able to create my own family and my own versions of love and support. So living with my friends, because actually after I left home, I moved in with an awful ex, like my first proper boyfriend. So it wasn't a great move, but it was one of the few options I had at the time. But then, working through that and eventually living with friends, to being able to eventually buy my own place, which was the most blissful experience I've ever had in my life. A massive turning point in my neurodivergent journey, like having my own space and being so content with that, which again, I'd never had when I was a child. So yeah, hopefully that explains a little bit about the environment and home life side of things.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really sorry you had to go through that. And I'm really happy that you found those friends. That's so incredible that you're able to kind of get a new outlook on what life's actually supposed to look like. Because we don't pick how we're brought into this world, do we? And sometimes that's
No.
the privilege that we have, is where in the world we're even born, let alone the experience that we're in. But I want to thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really important. It can help people feel seen as well, which is powerful. And I honestly could talk to you. I'm getting emotional about it. I could talk to you about it all day, because it really matters to me that we get this out. But we're going to try and stick to the nutrition. So everyone's coming back on. Our good friend Amy's coming back in July. So we'll have you back on, and I'd love to dive in more on that one.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds good. I'll
but
come back
yeah,
anytime.
yeah, thank you so much. So before we get into our main topic about nutrition, what are the key blocks and struggles you're seeing with your clients when they're coming to you for coaching? I guess this could be nutrition and just generally around that too. What are the key things you're seeing about them which is holding them back, do you think? Just briefly.
I think a big lack of understanding of how the main symptoms of ADHD and other neurodivergence impacts food. Like, we're taught about how the symptoms impact day-to-day life and emotional regulation, but we're not really taught about that in relation to how those things then show up and impact our food choices. So a big lack of understanding, a lot of judgment and shame around food. A lot of people who've been influenced by the fitness industry to think, oh, it's just eat less, move more, or food is easy, I should be able to do it. A lot of self-comparison, which we know, neurodivergent people struggle with anyway. Um, that whole narrative of this is just the way I am. Like, this is one reason I really wanted to get assessed and find out if I was neurodivergent, because a lot of the content you see online around neurodivergence and fitness is very disempowering. So there's a lot of listing of symptoms, which, we need to understand the symptoms and how a neurodivergent brain can impact us in relation to fitness. But then we need solutions. We need to know that there can be a different story and we can rewrite that for ourselves. So I think that was one of the reasons that I was so invested in learning about myself and my brain, to be like, yeah, I know how hard it can be. I know how hard it can get, but I also know change is 100% possible. And when we look at food and fitness and how nourishing our bodies and brains and exercising regularly can have a profound impact on symptoms. It's not going to cure ADHD. It's not going to cure an autistic brain, despite what a lot of people on the internet like to say. But when it comes to being able to manage symptoms, nourishing yourself and moving your body are two fundamental parts of that. So yeah, I think the key blocks, the lack of understanding, thinking it should be easy, self-comparison, but then also the narrative of this is just the way I am and I can't change it. It's a combination of all of those things that I see with my clients.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, isn't it? Because people, when they think about health and the body and ADHD, the first thing we always hear is how important it is to move. We know for so many, not for everybody, for so many ADHDers, the element of moving your body and maybe doing focus movement too. So you're actually in your body and you're training, neural pathways in your brain to send certain signals to parts of the body, how important that is. But you don't often hear about nutrition so much, I have to say, in a lot of the stuff that I've been seeing out there, and how neurotypical, neurodivergent people we talk a lot about emotional eating and our relationship to food and what are we using it for. And so many people saying it's fuel, that's all it is. It's just fuel, and ignoring the enjoyment of food. So it's like, where do you sit? So I guess when you're working with clients, as we touch on the eating habits, especially for those with their neurodivergent brain, do people have lots of belief systems around food? What they think it's for and how they should use it? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, because I mean, it's normal human tendency to think in black and white terms with food. And it's definitely a neurodivergent tendency to have that all or nothing, black and white, all in or all out with food. And everybody wants fixed rules. So clients come to me wanting me to say to them, never eat processed food because that will make your ADHD worse. Because we have to think how busy and stressful everyone's lifestyles are in general, and then add a neurodivergent brain into that mix. If I can say to somebody, never eat carbohydrates after 6 p.m. or cut out all sources of trans fats and never eat processed foods, that's easier for our brains to grasp because it's a fixed rule. We don't have to make decisions. So that is what I see a lot of in relation to food and nutrition, people wanting a fixed meal plan or fixed rules. But we both know that that will not last long term. That's not giving somebody autonomy to listen to their body, which is very difficult with the neurodivergent brain, to listen to their body, but then also to parent themselves with food choices at times, because we have to do that a lot as neurodivergent people, while also being able to experience pleasure and joy and connection with food. And then to be able to emotionally at times, without feeling that guilt and shame, to seek dopamine from food. That's something that we have a capacity to feel that neurotypicals don't. And I feel sorry for them. I love getting a heightened dopamine response to food. But a lot of neurodivergent people can feel out of control in that situation. So it's how we balance all of those things and really focus on the strengths that our brain can have with food and the positives, while also knowing that we can work on the things that we find more challenging with nutrition and food as well.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so interesting, isn't it? It's because, when I think of ADHD especially, is this drive to regulate ourselves. All our systems are struggling to self-regulate. So much of our time and our energy is used on meeting ourselves and having to regulate ourselves back down. So we really need to be a best friend to our nervous system and to our brain. And I think when we're trying to regulate that, if we are dysregulated, we're much more likely to be impulsive and compulsive about the way we're going to eat. But also, if we did spend that time pre-eating, trying to regulate ourselves in all these other ways, whether it's fiddle toys or being out in a vast space or exercise, we're going to enter the kitchen in a much more regulated place and we're much more less likely to do it. So it's more like a holistic approach to how we treat our body will help us in the kitchen, would you say?
100%, 100%. Most food choices that come from a less healthful place are from a dysregulated place. And this is actually something I've not spoke about it online yet because, well, I've got loads to speak about online. And while my personal experience is relevant, it is, like I said, coming from a privileged place, qualified nutritionist. I understand all of these things as well. But I have been reducing my processed foods consumption, not eliminating, still love processed foods and eat them regularly. But I've been reducing the amounts I rely on processed foods to see if that helps me feel more regulated. But to be able to do that, we have to be more regulated day to day because most people overly rely on processed foods because of dysregulation, because of how overwhelmed they feel, how for neurodivergent people, we know that dysregulation can show up as physical symptoms. So that's going to reduce somebody's brain capacity to be able to make decisions with food or to be able to eat regularly. So self-regulation is absolutely key, but we have to make self-regulation techniques accessible and realistic for neurodivergent people. Because if somebody said to me, to be regulated, you've got to meditate for 10 minutes every time before you go into the kitchen, I am never doing that. If somebody said to me, to self-regulate, you have to have an ice bath at 4 a.m. each morning, I'm not doing that. It's with the clients I support, a lot of the self-regulation work we do is little bits throughout the day, maybe just a minute of breath work or starting with 30 seconds, sprinkled throughout the day alongside some other self-regulation techniques that always need to be personal to an individual to keep people in that calmer state. So like you were saying, they can then go into the kitchen and make a conscious choice instead of impulse eating or binge eating coming in those moments.
Yeah, you don't want to be in that battle with your own instincts, even if they're misfounded. You're still having to be in a battle with them. And the reason I ask that, because my biggest thing is when I'm overstimulated because I've overdone it with editing and not taking a break and getting hyper focused, burning myself out. I get overstimulated, then I notice I get agitated. I can feel my body is shaking and I'm agitated. Unfortunately, what I've learned over the years before I was diagnosed, that having whatever food you want to name, I'm not going to name them all the processed foods that we know, there is this euphoric thing where my body goes, ah, like you would get, I'm sure, from breath work. And obviously, I find lying on a hard floor really helps me, gets me back into my body. These are all tools that I use now, but what it was actually giving me relief. And I was getting in a cycle of nervous system is have a couple of scoops of ice cream, smile on my face, I'm buzzing, but in a different way.
Yeah.
And then I've learned over time that if I can regulate and work in a sensible way and not overdo it with editing, blah, 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 I can come out of that and I go into the kitchen and I'm actually more drawn to not doing that than anything else. That's the reason I asked you. It's a kind of prime example, isn't it? Is that I've actually learned, my body learned, it's actually an incredible way of going, which isn't actually helping me long term.
What you were saying there as well, a massive piece of the work we do with our clients is the acceptance that you probably won't find anything in the moment that hits like that ice cream does. We have to accept that. We've got to stop lying to people and saying breath work, lying on the floor, a bath, a walk are going to give you what food does. It won't. I'm not saying it won't for anybody because we're all different, but if we can accept we're not trying to replace how food makes us feel, but we are trying to widen our toolkit of things we've got to support ourselves and things that we can turn to make us feel good, that actually allows us to enjoy food more. Because now when you're having your ice cream, you're going to be able to sit down. Maybe you'll add some other bits to it to make it a bit more nourishing, or maybe you won't, because a couple of scoops of ice cream on its own is more than okay. But you're actually going to enjoy it more because you're not relying on it all the time. And that's very important as well for neurodivergent people to have that acceptance.
It's interesting as well because I wanted to come back to, thank you for that, coming back to what you said near the beginning there when we're thinking about PDA, so pathological demand avoidance. I'm not a big fan of that term. A friend of mine on my coaching course came up with an amazing one, which is a pervasive drive for autonomy. So pervasive drive autonomy is way more positive, and it's a driver in you to have autonomy. I like that. I'm very like that. You touched on it earlier. If you told me, Owen, you have to eat this way, this quantity in this way, I couldn't do it because of this PDA. It would drive me mad. I need to be able to walk into the kitchen, obviously with confidence, hopefully good choices, be able to taken everything you've taught me, but deliver it in a way for myself. It wouldn't work having structure. You touched on that earlier. So I guess there's a lot of that when working with neurodivergent brains, is really figuring out how your brain works, getting a real good compassionate witness about that, being able to see it and being able to adjust. Because yeah, for me, that drive for autonomy is huge. And I will actively rebel against that. So like, no, screw you. I'm going to eat this. So I guess, are you finding that sort of element of PDA, like you said, is can be a bit of a block for people?
Yeah, lots of my clients are little rebels, which I love because I am the same, like you've just described there. And I think this is where fitness can need to be different for a lot of people who are neurodivergent, because so many people start on a health and fitness journey to lose body fat. And with a neurodivergent brain, if somebody who's neurodivergent is given a meal plan or a training program and is told, if you stick to this for 8 weeks, you will achieve an incredible body transformation. We are sticking to that for 8 weeks, harder than anybody else. And that can lead to more black and white thinking with food, that all or nothing mindset, that on track, off track mindset with food, which for neurodivergent people to truly find food freedom and to get to a place where, of course, we can have body composition goals. Many of our clients do. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's how we go about it. And is your approach to fitness playing into your natural desire for perfectionism? Because after the 8 weeks is up or after the plan is finished, that's when that little rebel will be screaming so loud. And this is why neurodivergent people are at a higher risk of binge eating and eating disorders. And again, that was one reason that I wanted to spend my time sort of specializing more in this area, because one of my own experiences, yes, but two, when we look at the research, there's a 30% increased risk of binge eating in people who have ADHD. I actually think it's much higher than that. I think nearly every person with ADHD will have experienced binge type behaviours, binge urges at some point, and for some of us, over a prolonged period of time as well. And then when we look at autism, there's way higher rates and lots of links with anorexia as well. So and all eating disorders are, devastating, but we're talking about really serious things here. And if clients who have ADHD aren't supported properly, that can have some really serious implications.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you said, with the ASD and the autism, it's kind of like sitting on the fringes of neurotypes of, I'm not sure if obsession's the right word, but I'm using that because I had that in my early 20s, but like this obsessive nature of hyper focusing on this is amazing, this way of living will be amazing. I'm just being so obsessed with it to the point that I nearly got ill. So I was
Yeah.
doing just briefly, I was doing half marathons. So I was doing a half marathon every 2 weeks all over the Southwest. It was incredible. I love race day. I was eating to, well, in my opinion, to perfection for a runner. I got my body fat down to only 10%. I had abs for the first time. But what had happened is I got so obsessed with the quantity I was eating, to the miles I was doing, to the calories that I was burning. I got so obsessed with it that it was fine for a while. Then I started to get injured. I was getting all kinds of problems with joints, and also I was just getting a bit faint and dizzy at work towards the end of shifts. And then I would still no hardly any sugar at all. But the point is, in my brain, this is healthy, right? I'm a runner. But I got
Yeah.
so obsessed, I couldn't stop. I needed to literally I got so injured that I couldn't run for months. And then it started to drift away and the obsession had gone. But what are your thoughts there on this kind of, our brain can get so hyper focused that it's now losing itself in the whole process?
Yeah. Very, very dangerous spiral that. I'm really glad in a strange way that you got injured and that sort of brought you out of it. Because society glorifies what you were experiencing. You'll have been told you were dedicated. You'll have had so many people asking you, how are you doing it? How do you, get yourself to run every day and meticulously monitor all your food intake? And I am not saying somebody exercising regularly and being in a routine with that is disordered. I'm not saying somebody tracking and weighing their food and being aware of calories is disordered. It's not. But it's very clear to see how, for a neurodivergent brain, we have to be careful with these things. And yes, we can teach people how to use tools like calorie tracking or writing out meal plans or, training programming and setting targets with running and using an app. We can teach neurodivergent people how to use these things, but we have to teach them ways of being flexible and challenging themselves. And being like, even if you've got a drive to go on the run that you had planned today, let's just do a walk instead. Or let's mix it up and have the morning in bed and do you run on an evening, which maybe you wouldn't normally do. Because for me, that internal hyper focus and getting into routines, because that's what our brains love and crave as well, that did turn into anorexia for me, which resulted in me being in hospital because I was just restricting more and more and more and exercising more and more. Initially, I got praise when I started doing those things. And then when you get praise and validation, a lot of us haven't ever felt that in our lives before. So you want more of it. And you fear that if I stop doing the running, if I stop eating this way, people won't like me anymore. And this is the first time people have liked me in my life. So of course, we want to then stick with that. But the word you used, obsession, that is correct. It's an unhealthy obsession. And we know we know that OCD is a form of neurodivergence, but then a lot of the habits and the behaviors that can come from, ADHD and autism display as traits of OCD as well, because there's lots of crossovers. And it's really hard because you could have people that are fully into their fitness, that train multiple times a day even, and eat very, very well and are meticulous and want to track calories. And it isn't disordered for them, but it always depends on the intention behind the food and the exercise choice, how those things are making someone feel, not just in the moment when we get dopamine and validation, but the long-term impact those things are having on somebody's quality of life. Because you've got many athletes that will live like that and they thrive doing those things and they're supported and it's fine. But the rest of us, we're not athletes. And we want a relationship with food, a relationship with exercise, and a relationship with our bodies that allow us to thrive instead of only feeling like we're thriving when we're in those rigid routines.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's that regulation point where you tip. So you're trying to make sure that you're regulating everything, including your behaviors. But it's when you tip over. So I was reinforced. You're right. Oh my God, Owen, you beat your PB. You're doing, mate. God, you look incredible. Oh, you ran all the way from your house to work and then had a shower and then worked on the bar. That's weird. Well, that's so inspiring. And then you tip. I tipped injuries. And then one day I increased my mileage by 4 miles. And then I got horrendously dehydrated. I was in so much pain, everything locked up. It was like my entire body went into spasm cramps. It was horrific. And it's then where you realize that it was fine actually up to a point, and then it tipped. And I guess being able to witness what we're doing sometimes the hardest thing for a human because we have to drop out of denial. I was in complete denial about it. And now that experience forever I'll always remember it to see that. Anyway, I could talk to you all day about this particular topic as well. But let's just make sure we wrap up these two questions before we finish up, which is especially the ADHD side, because a lot of sensory conversations happening in around ASD, autism, and things. But I find personally, I have a big sensory thing with food. I'm very particular about textures and things like that. So do you find that's brought to you as well, that people are trying to work around these texture issues?
Yeah, and that can throw a whole other dynamic into food and nutrition. A lot of the people we work with, especially if we're working with neurodivergent families, you can have a family who, the kids need different food cooking because of likes and dislikes, sensory issues, and then food has to be cooked in a specific way, and people have different sensory issues when it comes to textures and tastes and smells, even how food sounds for some of our neurodivergent clients. So there's lots of different things to take into account. And I think one of the worst things neurodivergent people can do is force themselves to try and eat normally, and I say normal, because normal eating is specific to an individual. And trying to keep yourself calm and regulated by eating in ways that don't push your sensory issues too far is very, very important. We work with a lot of autistic clients who have, well, they come to us with a very small list of safe foods. And it's how we work with those safe foods to very gradually add in more variety without tipping that balance and pushing them too far. So that is a skill that I don't feel. I mean, there's other great coaches that can do this work, but it takes a lot of skill and coaching ability and understanding and trust from your client as well, being able to build that trust and the right to be able to support somebody with that, in all honesty, is very, very important. But sensory issues, I mean, food is a sensory experience, right? Mm-hmm. And we talk to a lot of our clients, neurodivergent or neurotypical, about eating more mindfully, being in the present moment more often, and food being an experience most of the time. I mean, sometimes we have to eat practically because we're busy. That's fine. That's cool. But we want to be able to sit down and actually taste the food we're eating rather than just standing up and gulping it down as we run around the house multitasking. So we encourage all of our clients to think about senses a little bit more in general. But for our neurodiverse clients, that brings sensory issues more to the forefront of the work we do and working with them while supporting them to have a balanced diet. Because I had an autistic, she was 19 when she started working with me. She came to me with 3 foods: potato, chicken nuggets, and crisps. So obviously that's just another form of potato, right? And by the end of the first year of her working with me, we had 30 plus foods that we had very slowly approached. And she knew that, it wasn't going to look perfect. Some days she wouldn't have the capacity. Because also we've got to think, for neurodiverse people, our capacity changes not just day to day, hour to hour. So we have to have ways of assessing that and thinking, right, am I prepared to challenge myself in this situation? Is it the right decision in this moment? But also knowing that we are going to have to push a little bit to get a different result and to see change. So it's always that balance alongside everything we've been talking about, self-regulation and, giving yourself what you need. We talk to all of our clients about filling your cup. So, for somebody who's neurodivergent, there's lots of different things that, well, I'm neurotypicals, but rest isn't just laying down on a sofa watching a film. That's part of rest. It's one of my favorite parts of rest, but we need sensory rest. We need social connection to feel refilled and energized. We need meaning and purpose. We need spiritual rest. There's lots of different elements to rest. Movement can be restful and restoring. And I often find, have you seen that meme that says something like, you don't feel exhausted because you're doing too much. You feel exhausted because you're not doing enough for yourself.
Yeah.
That's literally describing a neurodivergent person who isn't supporting themselves with what they need to feel energized. So that's very important. And that comes into a lot of the sensory work we do with clients. Because again, if people are more regulated and understand more what they need to feel better most of the time, that's when we can push those sensory boundaries an appropriate amount.
Yeah, it's so complex because, as we know, with every client you're ever going to see, no matter what their background, they're all different and you have to approach it different ways, use different language. We know all this. But with this, I think it becomes even more complex. And I think even if you think from the perspective, we're running out of time here, but from RSD, So RSD for so
Yeah.
many people, rejection sensitive dysphoria, can actually lead you to people please. Therefore, you're making decisions based off how other people perceive you. So if you're going out for a meal, you don't want to look like you're going to get rejected. So you'll eat the same thing as them, even though it's really bad for your gut and it's going to cause all kinds of problems. So this RSD, the power of that leads us to want to try and eat in a way that we feel makes us feel accepted. I mean, that's a whole other thing on top, isn't it?
It is. It is. And it's RSD as well that we internalize, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not, a lot of people think of RSD and how others can make us feel. And that's a very real thing. And of course, that can have an impact on how we feel and food. But it's when we've set expectations of ourselves that we feel we've fallen short of. That is internalized RSD that can feel horrendous. So really moving away from thinking you ever have to be perfect, because like we've just been saying, your capacity is going to change. As long as you're trying, that is more than enough. And even the times when, because we all know what to do and sometimes choose not to do it. That's the little rebel again. You're still not a shit person. You've still not failed. It's just a bump in the road. It's part of human nature and human tendency to know what we should do and choose to do the opposite. That's more than okay at times as well. um and really focusing on that mindset will help support moving further away from RSD.
So true. The internalized aspect, how it plays out publicly and outside of us as well. It's a big thing. I mean, we could do a whole 10 minutes on that. The next question was actually all in and around emotional eating. I think we've covered a lot of that already. But before we sort of wrap up the show, is there anything you think that's vital that we've not said in relation to the topic here today?
I think if friends and family can be quite dismissive around struggles that neurodivergent people feel with food and with fitness, asking them to listen to this podcast. I know you will have lots of other episodes that will delve into this, and you'll have resources. I've got many, many free resources around ADHD and food that I can send to anybody anytime. And asking the people in your life to just show some more understanding and compassion, even if they don't get it, even if they are neurodivergent or they aren't, and they don't experience the same things, that doesn't devalidate how you feel. But I do the work I do because I know that every single human deserves to have a thriving relationship with food, a thriving relationship with their body, not just surviving, not just existing, and to achieve real food freedom where food doesn't feel stressful or overwhelming, where we don't have to be obsessive or restrictive. But also on the flip side, that doesn't mean we say yes to everything and we spend all day overeating. It is finding this middle ground that will allow our bodies and brains to function at their best, but where food and experiences with food adds to our life instead of causing stress and guilt and resentment and takes away from life. Because we really do get one shot. And I think food can be a wonderful part of life, or it can be very destructive, unfortunately, if people aren't working on these things.
Yeah, thank you. It's one of the biggest parts of our lives, isn't it? Other than sleeping, eating is going to
Yeah,
be, it's in the top two or three things that we're doing every day. It's not that
yeah,
you can't stop doing unless I guess you're intermittent fasting for a few days, but other than that, it's something we have to do. And having the healthiest relationship we can with some joy in the mix, with some nutritional, not strict's not the right word, but you know what I mean? Just finding
yeah,
a healthy relationship for us personally, where we get to love what is an amazing gift to us, which is food, which is so
yeah.
lovely. Amazing. Thank you so much, Sophia. We should definitely get you back on so we can actually spend more time on some of this. Everybody at home, we will cover this a lot more. This was our first episode on the topic. Sophia's been amazing, so we just wanted to start somewhere, lay the foundations so we can move forward from there. So, Sophia, this is your opportunity now, just before we finish off, is your message of joy, I guess, your message of hope to the audience. So, to all our NDers listening, what would be your parting message about being ND and being in this world?
One thing I have really focused on more recently, and obviously as a true ADHD, I'm going to get tattooed on my body,
Hmm.
is that everything is only ever temporary. And I get goosebumps when I say that, because that means that the great times are only temporary, but then the awful times are only temporary as well. And we always need those reminders. And I guess the last little thing, something that I've really been focusing on the last couple of years, when you are more regulated, you are able to experience so much more joy and pleasure and peace and true happiness, which I never thought would be possible for me. I thought chaos was just life. And of course, we all experience chaos at times, but that should be rare. So really trying to focus on what you need to do to support yourself and knowing that getting to that place will take time. Took me 30, well, I'm 36, so 34 years it took for me to find that. But it's so worth getting to that place, not just with food, but with life in general as well.
I love that. I could add on to that. I'm not going to, but that was wonderful. Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I absolutely love this. Thank you, Amy Barlow, for connecting us. This has been amazing. And where can we find you online? You've got so much going on, but where's the best place to go?
Either our website, which is apollonutrition.co.uk, but for everything up to date, Instagram is going to be the best place. So Sophia_Apollo_nutrition.
Amazing stuff. It's all in the show notes, guys. So go and check it out. Go and listen to the podcast. It's fantastic. Some amazing guests on the show. So go and check that out. So thank you so much, Sophia, for being here today. I've loved talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for all your support. We're growing so fast. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time for some more ND chat.